well to everyone who's joining us from around the world. And it's also great to have my IIC partners and colleagues as part of this webinar today. My name is Renee Arrington, and I am President and COO of Pearson Partners International and Vice Chair of the Americas for IIC Partners. It is my extreme honor to moderate this conversation today with four incredible leaders who are joining us from four different parts of the world and also representing four different industries. Their ideas and accomplishments on innovation, I am sure, will impress and inspire each of you. These are four very sharp minds, and as your moderator today, I'll have to be on my tippy toes to keep up with the conversation. We have an hour together today, and I'd like to take 45 minutes in conversation, and then we'll go to Q&A for about the last 15 minutes. So along the way, as you're inspired to ask a question, just drop it in the chat box, and we'll see to it as quickly as we can. I do want to jump right in. So our topic is innovation, leading change through disruption. And what better year to have a conversation about disruption and innovation and change than 2020. I know we've all experienced it in this craziness that is 2020. And our topic is also very timely since it's Nobel season. And the Nobel Institute has awarded innovations in science and technology and other fields throughout the course of the last 2 weeks. So we're very timely in talking about innovation today. And I think what we'll hear, that innovation is one of the keys to navigating change successfully. And I think our panelists will tell us that innovation comes in all shapes and sizes. It can be large or small. It can develop slowly or quickly. It can be foundational or incremental. It can be in the simple things well executed, or in the very difficult things well attempted. And innovation, of course, is driven by technology and digitization, but that's no guarantee for success. Innovation requires cultural change, business model reinvention, structure, discipline. It is hard work. And we'll also hear that innovation comes to us from many, many sources. Your colleagues, external partners, startups or scale-ups, and it must be accompanied by strong leadership and positioning, preferably at the top of the organization, so that it can succeed. And I'd like to have us keep a quote by Albert Einstein in mind that I found that I think is particularly relevant to innovation. So let's talk about that for a moment. Einstein said, "We cannot solve our problems by the same thinking used to create them," right? So inherent in innovation, one must change our thinking. And so please reflect on that as I now go to our wonderful panelists. I'm going to introduce each of them, and then we'll get into questions. So first, let's welcome Angela Yoakum. Angela is Chief Digital and Technology Officer for Novant Health. She comes to us today from the USA, from Charlotte, North Carolina. Angela has a team that leads remarkable patient care advancements through delivering differentiating digital products and services. They work as a high-performing interdisciplinary business unit. They operate with a spirit of innovation and agility, and their goal is to reshape the future of healthcare. Now, a word about Novant. They're considered a super regional healthcare system here in the US. They're nonprofit, they're high growth. They have 30,000 members, 16 hospitals, and over 700 locations in 5 states. Angela, welcome. Say hello. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Delighted to have you. Now I'm going to move south from North Carolina down to Latin America. I think Gilbert's in Argentina today, although he could be in Uruguay or another country. But Gilbert Engelbien is one of the 4 co-founders and CTO of Globant. He focuses on technology, innovation, and creativity, which has allowed his company, Globant, to become an expert in next generation practices like AI, big data, IoT, user experience, cloud, and much, much more, while, and this is important, at the same time allowing for the construction of a culture based on innovation. Gilbert is passionate about the digital transformation and how the interaction between humans and intelligence gets us there. He developed and launched a social media operating system for organizations of the future called Start Me Up OS, and we'll get more into that today. And a bit about Globant. They're a digitally native company where innovation, design, and engineering meet scale. It's one of the biggest IT companies in Latin America and operates in 17 countries. Gilbert, buenos dias, and thank you for being here today. Very nice to have you.
Hello,
Buenos
everyone.
We're happy to have
Very
you.
nice being with you, Renee. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move north to Europe now, and we'll go specifically to Paris. And we're going to welcome Guillaume Cabrera to our panel. Guillaume is a group director of open innovation for Société Générale. He is an experienced digital strategist and innovator who's founded and run his own company and also worked in large enterprise companies. Today, he is with Société Générale, working at scale to design an outside-in approach to innovation to help reinvent banking and what it stands for. Now, the thing about Guillaume, when you go to his LinkedIn page, you don't see his face, you see a picture of a t-shirt that says, "Make mistakes." And honestly, what better representation of a lifelong learner who is passionate about innovation than that phrase, "You have to make mistakes." Just a quick word about Société Générale. They're one of the leading European financial services groups. They have over 138,000 members in 62 countries. And on a daily basis, they support 29 million customers, whether they're individuals or businesses or institutional investors. Guillaume, bonjour, bienvenue. Happy to have you here.
Bonjour, everyone. Thank you very much for being with us today. And thank you, Renee, for having us.
You are so welcome. You are so welcome. And now I'd like to head south from France to India and welcome Sushant Dash to our panel. He is president of packaged beverages for India, Bangalore, and the Middle East with Tata Consumer Products Limited. His responsibility is driving growth strategy and outcomes, including innovations for this packaged beverages category in India and for the overall businesses in Bangladesh and the Middle East. He has led various strategic initiatives and operational roles in his time with the company. He's been head of marketing for all of India. He's been a venture team leader in the UK, and he was a senior director of marketing and business development for Tata Starbucks. It is such a pleasure to welcome Sushant. Tata Consumer Products, as many of you may know, is part of India's Tata Group, which posts over 110 billion US dollars in revenue with 30 different companies. Sushant, namaste and welcome.
Thank you, Renee, for having me here, and hello, everyone.
So delighted to have you. Well, so we've talked a bit about what we think innovation might be, but let's hear now from our panelists how they each define innovation or disruptive innovation. And back being first, Sushant, I'd like to start with you. Tell us how you define innovation.
I would like to keep it simple. I think for me, innovation is anything, and disruptive innovation more so, which solves for an unmet consumer need, something that has still not been solved from a consumer's point of view, or something which is unsolved from a business point of view, be it in terms of efficiency or cost. And if we use differential thinking, a new way to solve for this, and to make a significant change to the business ecosystem, I think that's an important one. We shouldn't be doing innovation for the sake of innovation. It needs to have some benefit at the end of the day in terms of to the business, top line, bottom line, to the community. I think that's important. And if we do that, I think that in true sense is innovation for me.
Well said, and we'll come back to that definition and pull some threads through here. I want to move now to Gilbert. Tell us in your mind, how do you define innovation?
Well, innovation is adding to what Shashank has said is, is making things happen. Not only ideation, but it's also making them happen. So there's an execution. Everybody associates innovation with new ideas that definitely need to solve human problems and enable new avenues of growth for organizations. But it's overall a problem about also execution. And that's a subject that I really care about, is how do we make sure that we can unleash innovation, we can empower individuals and groups to actually think outside the box, think in new and different ways of achieving growth. So overall, I believe it's a very human, there's a very human aspect to it, although we have been pushed by technology, but there's a human component that I'm very happy to talk about today.
Absolutely, and I'm eager to hear about that. I've heard innovation referred to as almost a contact sport, right? So I'm really eager to hear your thoughts on that here in a minute. But let's move to Guillaume. Hello, and tell us how you think about and define innovation in your roles.
I think very, very simply, innovation is probably about creating either new value or capturing value in a new way. So it's either the what or the how that you're working on. And of course, there has to be some tangible benefits attached to it. I would definitely concur with what Gilbert just said. But the key word here is really value. And that's probably what makes the distinction between innovation and invention, for instance. There has to be a market. And speaking of which, just back to this notion of disruptive innovations, I think that sometimes we mistake one for the other. We mistake disruption with revolution, and I think they're not exactly the same. Disruption innovations are basically innovations that make products and services more accessible and affordable to a wider number of people. So to that extent, the first automobiles back in the 19th century were definitely not a disruption because only a handful of people could afford them. The real disruption came probably 20 years later with the Ford Model T, which changed the transportation market forever because then almost everyone could afford to buy a car. So it's a small distinction, but it's an important one. The disruptions are there to create new markets by making things more accessible, more affordable to a bigger number of people.
Oh, Guillaume, I love that example, and I think you're absolutely right. That's an interesting way to parse between the two. So we'll come back to that thread. But I now want to go to Angela. And how do you define and think about innovation or disruptive innovation?
Well, I agree that innovation is typically associated with addressing new problem sets or creating new opportunities for your company, like delivering new business models, new revenue streams, branching into new markets through new channels. But with the world so rapidly changing around us, being innovative means approaching even the oldest problems in new ways with fresh eyes. And this might mean building unconventional partnerships and with an ecosystem of partners inside and outside your company to accelerate your strategies, or creating constructs in your company that allow for rapid experimentation with new capability sets. Anything, if you believe that diversity of thought and experience is critical to your company's success over time, why would we not build constructs to supercharge that and allow us to work in ways that have not been touched thus far? So.
No, I think that, thank you for that. I think that's important, and something you said in there, I want to pull through and go back to Sushant, and I'm going to come around to each of you now and talk about some specific questions around innovations in your career. And the thing that you said, Angela, that I think, Sushant, you've demonstrated perhaps is in the FMCG industry, right? In the consumer goods industry, there may not be the risk tolerance or the appetite for huge investment or huge risk because I think your margin picture is different than other industries. So you may have to frame innovation, pulling on what Angela said, in terms of a simple thing, just very well executed, right? And then that becomes an innovation. I want to talk about a couple of things in your background. The first is the Jaguar cause marketing campaign. And while it, again, on its face, it was a marketing campaign, it wasn't, a new invention necessarily, but the way that you did it and tackled it, the timing that you launched that in India, I think that's an innovative example of something that was a little more simple, but just so well executed, and then packaged together with the back end of that, which was actually probably the more innovative piece of it, the digital enablement of pulling those products through so many consumers through such a small set of suppliers in a country like India, right? So I think those two things together are kind of a 1-2 punch, if you will, of innovation. Could you elaborate on those for us?
Sorry, I was on mute. Sure. One of the things I think, like the other panelists also mentioned, a lot of it has got to do with two things. One is the execution. Everyone has ideas, but how you execute and actually make a difference, I think that's what separates true innovation or disruptive innovation. And I think that's important. And I'll talk about that in a bit in both the examples. The other is, as you rightly said, in FMCG, it is, you keep doing renovations, which are small incremental changes, but true step change is very difficult to come by. And most of the time you do it if you are under tremendous pressure in terms of, the business collapsing or market shares, losing market share, or, things which are quite serious in terms of the business. Otherwise, disruptive innovations are few and hard in between. And I think Gilbert talked about it. The idea is, how do you put it into a process and make it into a virtuous cycle rather than just do innovation or disruptive innovation when there is pressure. So I think those are two things that just strike me. I thought I'll just mention them before I get into the examples. So coming to Jaguar, and as you rightly said, these days, brands with a cause, brands that stand for something are actually, that's the buzzword in the marketing world. And a lot of people are talking about it. People associate brands not for the functional attributes so much. And mainly the millennials, they want to be associated with brands that stand for a certain cause. But as you rightly said, we did this 15 years back. When we started it, brands still talked primarily of their product or what the functional attributes was, or what is the value at a transactional level that they brought to the consumer. So we were one of the first brands that actually moved out of a transactional equation, so as to say with the consumer, to a completely emotional equation. In fact, in the initial Jaguar campaign, we didn't even show our brand. We didn't talk of what the product was, that it was for a beverage brand. And it was a huge leap of faith in terms of trying to do something like that and trying to win over the consumer to come and buy your product. But I think it was not just about communication, as you rightly said. It was in terms of a movement, in terms of how you interact with consumer. It was in terms of how you start using the digital media, where you could actually, from a one to many, which is what, let's say, a television or print advertising was all about. Digital started, and mainly social media, the growth of social media started affording you to talk one-to-one. It helped you to engage with consumers on a more direct basis. And this campaign actually used that. And what we actually did was not only took up causes which were affecting and which we thought the youth of the country at that point of time was worried about and created awareness about them, but we also told as to how each individual or each consumer or each person could make a difference to move the needle on that cause, be it in terms of women equality, be it in terms of going out and voting, because a lot of Indians were not voting. There was a lot of cynicism, mainly the youth was not voting. We started with that. I know it's topical in the US right now, so that was actually one of the first causes that we took up in terms of, we then talked about corruption, which when you think about it for a tea brand or a coffee brand or a water brand to talk about without even mentioning is actually a huge leap of faith. But it was also not just about talking about it. And I think the important part of it is in terms of how you walk the talk. As a brand, how do you tell the consumer what is it that they can do? And more importantly, as a brand, how do you walk along with the consumer to make a difference? So that is what the Jaguar campaign, and Jaguar is the Hindi equivalent of awaken. So in some ways, the whole idea was also from a product point of view, any tea or coffee wakes you up, it provides you with energy. But this was about taking it a step further and not just waking up in the morning, but awakening in terms of social consciousness. So that's what the Jaguar campaign in short was. There's a campaign that has been the longest running campaign in many ways. We have now 14 years into this campaign. Every year, couple of years, we make it topical. We change whatever is relevant in terms of the current issue, let's say the country or the region is facing. We talk about it. We create awareness. We then talk about how you can make a difference. And finally, we actually contribute to the cause. The latest two that we have talked about is in terms of sports, in terms of schools, because we have realized that kids these days are moving away from sports, and that actually has a long-term impact in terms of how a culture, a country moves forward. People are too desk-bound, too much into the social media and stuff like that, and not going out and playing as much. So physical education is becoming an issue. So we actually ran a full campaign in terms of creating awareness, going up to the ministers, and actually asking them to be made, physical education to be made and sports being made a compulsory subject in schools and being graded same as, let's say, computer science or maths or physics. We were actually quite successful. We actually got the central minister to agree that they would do that and look into it. So that is the last time that we did it. Coming to the other example, which, as you rightly said, was more about distribution and logistics, that is actually much more interesting. And I know that a lot of audience might not be familiar with the distribution system in India. So just to give a brief background, in India, we distribute goods, mainly FMCG, consumer packaged goods, not through organized retail. So we do have the Walmarts and the Tesco's equivalent and the Carrefour equivalents in India, but they only contribute 10% of our retail environment. The remaining 90% of the retail environment are the small grocery store, the mom and pop store, as we call it, and they are 10 million in number. So if I want to reach the 1.3 billion Indians, I need to do it through this 10 million stores, okay? And that's a huge task given the length and breadth of the country to actually ensure that your goods reach 10 million outlets on a daily basis so that consumer can come and buy it. So the way we do it, and this is what most FMCG companies in India do, is you do it through a distributor. So you have 2,000 to 3,000 distributors. Those distributors in turn each go to X number of retailers, and so you send it to the distributors on a daily basis go and sell it to the stores, right? So before digital happened, you knew what you were selling to the distributor, but post that, it was a black hole. You didn't know as to what happened next because the distributor went and sold to the stores. He then collected the money and gave it to you. So I didn't know exactly what was happening at the store level, and in terms of hence influencing the small store owner to keep my goods or to upsell or to do range selling was a near impossibility. So that is again where innovation came in. That is where digitization came in. We now have smartphones that most of the salespeople carry at the front end when they go to the store. So you can exactly capture in terms of what he's selling at the store, what is stocked in the store, even in the small store. So basically, technology has helped you to do what you do in a large retail format, even in a fragmented 10 million kind of household, 10 million kind of retail outlet. And more importantly, I can now control and through analytics actually tell the person on every day in a beat, even though he's 5,000 miles away, in terms of what to sell to that store. So you manage your backend logistics, inventory, upselling through this innovation and through this digital media. So huge impact in terms of both in terms of cost, in terms of availability, in terms of inventory control.
I think that's fascinating, and I'll be really eager, Sushant, to follow the first of those you talked about, with regard to fiscal education being compulsory in schools in India. That could be a societal innovation that we may not see the impacts of until 10, 12 years hence. So that's also fascinating in a different way. Thank you for sharing both of those. I appreciate it. I'd like to go now to Gilbert. We've talked a little bit about how the human component of innovation is just as important as the technology component. And I know you have a lot of passion around that. So please tell us a bit about the social operating system you've developed and how you've applied that.
Yeah, well, on one side, Globant has been working a lot. So we've been working a lot with digital natives since we started. Companies like Google, Facebook, and many others. But on the other hand, we started to help organizations to transform. With the challenge organizations are facing today is massive. And I believe that we are looking at tackling at it with a very short perspective. Many people understand that the digital transformation is about doing digital, but it's actually, I believe, being digital. What that means is the fact that we need to create organizations in which humans blend with technology to become more human and to be able to connect better and with more people. And in order to provide them a clear set of, a clear environment where they can be empowered to actually unleash creativity. So with that in mind, like 13 years ago, we conducted an experiment which was to digitalize emotions. Emotions in the sort of social media. We know that we have blended with technology and that we need our phones and our social media every day. Well, we started to do something like that by empowering members of our organization to become guardians of a culture. So every time that someone did an action aligned with our values, our behaviors, they were able to pull up their phones and recognize anyone. The interesting thing about this flow of stars, which are this virtual currency, which is limited and that you need to use every month, is that it starts to highlight certain individuals that you wouldn't know otherwise. On the other hand, it starts to unveil the hidden nature of your organization. So today, what we are seeing is that by blending a number of emotions that, bringing up all these emotions in the form of praise, feedback, sharing social media, or posting ideas, we are gathering and tapping into a very large data pool that we have never touched upon. And now, through that, we are enabling, insights, algorithms create insights that are pushed to everyone's pocket, so you can become more aware, more focused, more enabled to actually confront your daily lives. Through this, we are also able to tag, not only giving everyone, the ability to fly like a bird. I like this flock of birds, who are flying in total, we're doing a beautiful flight, but in total autonomy. But at the same time, we are solving some of the problems that organizations are facing today. For example, attrition, diversity, inclusion. These are immense challenges. And how do you tackle this? You didn't have system of record to do that. So today, for example, we are using all this data to understand who may be disengaged from the organization, and we see that highly correlation with attrition happening on the organization. We are being able to see, to suggest people what other connections to make in order to increase their social capital and become a more inclusive organization, bringing everyone more visibility. We are also using it to suggest how to break out from the linearity of our daily calendars today that we are fully distributed. We are following a list of web meetings, but suddenly it is an excellent opportunity to say, hey, I'm gonna set up a calendar meeting with you, a Zoom meeting, where you will find people that are making the difference, regardless their origin, where they are from, you know, or people who share the same passion or works on the same problem. Through the use of AI, we are able to suggest you new ways of dealing with all these liquid organizations. You know, I believe that organizations are going from a hierarchical structure to to a team-oriented organization, a more agile organization, and we crafted a social operating system that allows you to run an organization that is more complex in nature in terms of to understand it, how to move, but you need to have like technology at hand to and actually to do that. So this is something we've been doing. We believe on creating a habit around embracing technology and blending with technology. Another thing that we have done many years ago is to make sure that everyone was ready to adopt AI in everything that we do. So 5 years ago, we said, okay, 100% of the organization needs to be trained on understanding the rudimentaries of AI, what it means, what kind of problems you can solve with that, in order to identify that perhaps the problem you're doing every day shouldn't be attacked in the same manner going forward. 5 years after, now we use AI to code better. You know, we develop a lot of code. So our developers are being provided with source code that does what they want to do, you know, and they explain it in natural language. We are also using code to document better. We give them code and it gets the documentation. To design better, we design in front of a camera and it produces code. To test better, creating test cases for software that are more resilient and adaptable. So to recruit better, actually we are now, we have AI that sits in an interview and essentially understands and matches what we are, the candidate we have in front of us with high performers in our organization and gives you like an advice, okay? So with the aim of reducing bias, okay? So there are a number of things that we are doing. So this is a massive cultural shift in which we have partnered up with technology to become better. And I believe that kind of organic view is key, you know, for transforming large organizations. If you are in a large organization, you are facing a lot of friction, lack of alignment, silos, adversity, you know, risk aversion. There are a number of things that we need to tackle, and I don't believe it's going to be on your email or your calendar the key for that. You need to tackle it in another way, and also to adapt data as a key component to how you live your daily lives.
I want to stop there, Gilbert. I could continue, but I think that's fascinating. And I'm reminded that how progressive that was 5 years ago when AI was just kind of coming on the scene, and you guys chose to build that model and deploy it inside Globant. We'll loop back around to that. I do, though, want to pull the thread of AI. And Angela, I want to go over to you because I know leading innovation, you know, in your role in the middle of a global pandemic, I'm sure you've had to pull on some things that you didn't plan to, and I know you use AI in your organization today. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, similar to Gilbert's story, we have AI-based solution sets have permeated every aspect of our business. It certainly influences, you know, how we deliver care, and I can tell you a little bit about that. You know, how we, you know, diagnose conditions, get to optimal treatment plans for conditions, prevent major health events before they happen, and certainly everything that happens in the back office. So I think that we're now to the point where we can safely say that your role may or may not be made obsolete by some AI-based solution, but your role, those who are in your role and are using AI-based solutions will replace those who do not. I think that's a pretty safe bet to make these days. So at Novant Health, we typically think about our focus areas in two big buckets, and this is a gross generalization, but we think about providing enhanced access to care, right? We want people in our communities to have access to care when they need it, how they need it. And then we think about higher quality of care, increasing the quality of care that we provide. And so to give you just a couple of examples in each, as it relates to providing access to care, the expansion of digital channels through which we deliver care and the digital enhancements through which we deliver care inside of our traditional channels continue to be largely AI driven. So this could be everything from, we have devices with advanced sensor capability that allow patients to collect information, vital information about their own health, stream it live into an AI-based system that exists in a cloud-based environment elsewhere, that in turn guides and communicates with the patient as they continue to adjust the sensors and understand how to best take a reading. I mean, those are the sorts of things that are very basic, but when you're talking about AI application, that is like a standard day-to-day AI-based solution that allows us to expand access. Another way that we expand access with AI would be things like, we just built a brand new cancer center, has all the usual oncology offices and hematology offices and so on. But when we built the infusion section, there are no waiting rooms in the infusion section. Why would we need a waiting room, right? With advanced scheduling capability that is largely AI driven, why would we need a patient to sit outside and wait for their turn in a chair? We can direct them to which chair at exactly the second it needs to be, or they need to sit down in it with exactly the right medicines and so on, and according to their treatment plans. So these are things that just daily life is enhanced by AI capabilities that we're incorporating. As it relates to quality, that's where I see some of the biggest changes. Simple example, stroke patient. When a stroke patient comes to one of our emergency departments, they're exhibiting stroke symptoms. What would typically happen in a hospital in the United States is that person would be whisked back and a CT scan would be run. The images would ultimately be investigated by a person, a radiologist on call, then a physician on call. And if there's a brain bleed or something that looks like an operable occlusion, something that could be affixed through an operation, then a brain surgeon on call would be notified, the team would be brought to the OR and a surgery would be performed. And that usually takes like 50 minutes, 60 minutes, national average. And every minute is, a huge lifestyle change for that patient if they survive at all. And so what we were able to do is, with one of our partners, we were able to stream the data from the CT scanner when the patient is still in the scanner, which happens pretty much as soon as the patient walks in, exhibiting stroke symptoms. And we can identify operable occlusions while the patient's still in the scanner, immediately get the OR ready, send the signals to get the OR ready, immediately send the associated images to the neurosurgeon on call. And we have operated on patients in as little as 14 minutes from the time they arrived at our facility. Wow. I mean, we have this is game changing. This is game changing for people with stroke, with strokes. Same thing with Parkinson's patients. We're now using capability that allows us to do incisionless brain surgery, largely AI driven again, and we're sending Parkinson's patients that have terrible tremors, who are wheeled in, they receive the procedure, and they walk out holding their own drink and signing their own name for the first time in many, many years, 3 to 4 hours after arriving. So these are the sorts of things that advanced technology is allowing us to do fairly easily. I mean, certainly there's an innovation associated with, changing the operational processes involved with, treating our patients as they come through. Certainly we have to understand how we short circuit long-standing processes that have stood the test of time. But I think when you look at the advances, how the advances in technology are intersecting with and enabling those scientific advances and medical advances, and how enthusiastic the practitioners are to embrace that sort of game-changing capability, we don't find a lot of pushback I mean, it's really, we're going to save lives if we start, if we embrace this sort of innovations that are happening outside of our four walls and incorporate them into innovations happening inside of our four walls. Same thing, you know, we work with a lot of partners, research organizations inside of large companies, university labs, individual innovators and inventors. These are all part of our ecosystem. And so a lot of the things that we do and that we put in place for our patients are not commercially available elsewhere. And because of that, we're able to provide, we co-create these solutions. And that offers up, of course, new business opportunities for us, as well as better patient care opportunities.
I just hate to stop you, Angela. I could listen for hours. What rewarding work on so many levels. And I know I'm very engaged, but I want to make sure we have an opportunity to hear from Guillaume and you know, the work that you're doing. I think financial services as an industry, Guillaume, has probably been more on the leading edge of innovation from some of the client work that I do serving financial services organizations. And I know you've looked inside your company for disruptive innovation. You've looked for unconventional partners. You have an entrepreneurship program going on. Tell us a bit about all of those, please.
Yeah, sure. And way before I arrived at Société Générale, basically, one of my predecessors had these intuitions that part of these disruptions, part of the answers to these new consumer needs could potentially start in-house. And so he had the idea to combine the knowledge and skill sets and expertise of our own teams with external partners, mainly incubators and accelerators, and try to combine both to have almost like the best of both worlds and some sort of a hybrid approach, if you like, both inside out, starting with our own people, and outside in with some fresh minds bringing a different ways to look at things and to build value props. So basically that ended up in the form of this massive entrepreneurship program. We launched a call and in fact, the program was called the Internal Startup Call, because we wanted for people to realize that in that case, we would go way further, way beyond the traditional ideation contest, you know, where basically you just throw things on the paper and back to Gilbert points, then nothing happens, it doesn't materialize, doesn't happen for real, and so it's for nothing. And show those folks that if they were ready to embark at some point, there would be the possibility for them to create their own venture, being backed by the firepower of this big mothership, which is Société Générale. And so we launched that. We had first 600 ideas from all around the world that we ended up funneling, and that turned out to be 174 potential ventures, which was still way too much compared to what we could incubate at any point in time. So we narrowed it down again, and we ended up with 60 ventures. Okay. And I know that some of my competitors or even Google would have narrowed it down even further. And we decided to stop there and to do something which is a little bit crazy, which is to incubate 60 ventures at the same time in 9 countries, working with 16 accelerators and incubators to see which one of those could potentially get the market traction, get this product market fit, and ended up providing something new, something tangible to the market, which would help solve a real pain point. Out of the 60, and that's the interesting part for me, we ended up with 8 which are currently beyond this threshold, and that we are currently incorporating, which is, it means something very tangible. We're launching 8 spin-offs out of these ideas. And to give you an idea, one of them is currently working with the central bank in France and has launched the first ever transaction entirely paid through tokens with the equivalent of a fully digitized euro. So a crypto euro, if you like. That's the first time in the world that a central bank accepts to do that live with a real bank and so on and so forth for a real transaction for 42 million euros. So we did it, and that's one of the early signals that helps me think that we were probably onto something. And when you are assembling this right mix of internal skill sets and external mindsets, you can achieve great stuff. But again, these are early signals, early days. It's way too soon to say if any of those 8 ventures that we're launching right now will thrive and develop and grow as they deserve to do so. more to come, obviously, but a pretty massive experiment that lasts for probably 18 months total, with a lot of implication from the top management that we also had to mentor to become themselves the mentor of some of these ventures. So it was both a business journey, if I may say so, a cultural journey, and trying to assemble the two parts of the equations to really have Société Générale realize that disruption could start basically from within as well.
Well, and I think too, there's a human element, as I know Gilbert was speaking about, and others have mentioned, Guillaume. If I'm a young leader inside Société Générale and I've had the opportunity to take this concept through this process, I, as a leader, am in a different place than when I started, and I'll be more well equipped, right, to serve the organization in a different way going forward. I think that's a really important outcome beyond just the actual hard innovation or product that you might receive from that. I feel that's very important. Now, I'm very cognizant of time. This has been such an engaging discussion. I feel like we could keep going. Before we go to questions, though, let's do a lightning round. Really quick, a quick answer from each of you. I'd love to learn. I am sure many of you inspire others in your organizations, and I'm sure you influence young leaders who work for you. I'd love to know, lightning round style, and we'll start with Angela. Who are your influencers? Whom do you follow? Who inspires you? And let's just go quickly from Angela to Guillaume to Sushant, and we'll end with Gilbert. Angela.
Yeah, so I love to follow people who are expert in their respective fields, and those fields may be very far afield from my own. So I love looking at what's happening in the scientific community, in the policy community, in the economist community, people who put together big, hairy problems and problem sets and find ways to guide optimal outcomes. I love those people, so I tend to follow that group.
Awesome. Guillaume, whom do you follow?
A couple of people, but one that comes on top of my mind is probably Satya Nadella. I still have a vivid memory of a meeting I had with him back in 2014, and I've never seen someone so benevolent, so centered, where everything clicks from the brain to the heart, to the body, to everything. He's telling the truth every single minute in his daily work. There's no excuse my French, with bull S, and everything is absolutely genuine in what he's doing, what he's thinking, his vision of the world, so Satya Nadella for all his human touch, great business mindset, of course, and everything he did over the past 6 years at Microsoft, which has no equivalence probably in an incumbent story.
Well, it's interesting, Guillaume. We had a speaker in our meeting on Wednesday who called out Microsoft as a top technology company from the ethics point of view. And I think that comes, from the top, from his leadership. Thank you for that. Sushant, whom do you follow?
So to me, actually, the end consumer, they are the biggest influencers. If you, and that's where I started my career as a consumer researcher in Nielsen. So it always helps to be influenced by the end consumer, what their pain points are. And if you're listening to them, I think you do the best innovation. So that's where inspiration and influence comes from.
That's a wonderful answer. And unexpected, but it shouldn't have been. Good for you. You've got your eye on your customer at all times. Gilbert, whom do you follow?
Well, I follow nature. I believe there are many things in biology, and I like, as Sushant has said, it's observing and trying to empathize with what you have in front of you, and trying to understand that the world is not centric on you. So trying to position yourself in another person, or trying to understand, to make sure, to extract bright spots, that you can replicate, and is key. One source of inspiration is software that works. I mean, when you look at things like TikTok, Instagram, or those, you try to distill, okay, what's the reason this is working? Why is people so passionate about this? Definitely, I also have some some good friends who I speak in terms of HR, Sal Giambanco, former head of HR from PayPal and eBay. He's a very good friend and advisor to us, and I always enjoy talking to him.
I love that, because it's always wonderful. I mean, as innovative as each of you are, and as important your accomplishments are, you can just look outside at nature and that helps put life in context, I think, Gilbert. It's a great way to look at it. I do want to go now to the chat box. I know we've had a lot of activity, and I'll ask my colleague Christine Hayward if there are any particular questions from the chat box that we need to highlight. I'm sorry, putting you on the spot there, Christine.
No problem at all. Thanks, Renee. It's been a very interesting discussion. We do have a question that's come in from Manoj. He's asking about value, risk, and inspiration appearing to be a diverging motivation for disruptive innovation. And his question is how each of you have led your teams to converge between your business units, control units, and the customer or the client. So I'm not sure who wants to tackle that one.
I would like to say that most of the time what I see innovation happening is like having a bonsai on the house, and you need to protect it. A common problem that we face is that we are used to linear businesses in which if we invest, we expect return in exchange, and that's a very predictable. But what we are doing right now, as we have the linear curve of return, any kind of experiment will drive eventually an exponential curve, eventually crossing and yielding far more results. But during the process in which you are not reaching those results, I highly recommend setting up certain metrics that will guide you, okay? And try to measure how many customers use your product, how frequently they come to it, and trying to guide your decisions based upon that. And then return will follow.
No, and I had that thought earlier, right? Particularly when Guillaume was speaking about the program inside Société Générale, when you go into such a massive undertaking as that, must you have some kind of metrics on the front end? Or maybe you don't, maybe you leave it wide open and that's where the creativity happens. But good question, and Manoj, thank you for that. Anyone else want to weigh in on that question before we move on?
Renee, we did have a question. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Guillaume.
No, I mean, back to Manoj's question, and hi, Manoj, we definitely need to reconnect, I know that. Yeah, bring your legal and compliance folks as soon as possible. Turn them into allies instead of having them discover what your future product proof would be about at the far end of the process, which is usually a recipe for disaster. Try to onboard them and embark them early enough in the process. And as well, don't hesitate to include them in all these sessions that every one of us are doing when you are trying to evangelize your own organization. There's definitely food for thought for them as well. So they should definitely be on the invite list, on the guest list. They should be exposed to the same stories of the Amazons or Googles of this world. So you have to help them dream a little bit beyond the traditional boundaries of the way they currently see their work. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it works. So definitely worth the effort.
No, that's a good point. And we have a colleague in our firm who focuses on a general counsel practice, and something she hears from her friends and clients is legal is sometimes the last to the party, and that not necessarily is the right answer in this innovative environment, Guillaume. So thank you for emphasizing that. Christine, other questions from the chat box?
Yes, we have a question from Roberto, who's asked about how you can create a culture of change in your organization so that everyone feels empowered to create value.
Who would like to jump in on that?
I think we are in the middle of such a journey, so maybe I can start. It probably ties back with the way you measure objectives, and so definitely OKR is a great way to have everyone shift and realize that everything that you're doing can be revisited on a regular basis. Maybe not on a 3-month basis, like it's the norm at Facebook or Google, but by progressively showing people that they are here to achieve objectives and not perform tasks, which is a huge difference, and helping them revisit slowly, maybe starting with a yearly basis, then 6 months basis, progressively 3 months basis, and then turn that into actual sprints. You help them develop this kind of adaptation muscles where they're able to revisit what they're doing and not feel threatened by the way that one of their projects is stopping, because they know that it's just part of a bigger, larger iteration loop, and that's okay to kill something as long as there's something new coming in the pipe and that you feel ready to embrace that very next step of your mission. So it's easy said, definitely not easy done. It took us like 12 months actually to start pivoting, and we are part of the innovation team, remember? So this is where you can see that the human brain sometimes fights with the idea that, oh, wow, I need to revisit my job like twice a year. What is that? It's chaos and whatnot. So OKR is definitely something central to help with that growth mindset, which is absolutely core in that case.
This is actually a problem that is facing us in all industries, even outside the realm of what we might label as innovation, because it's, you know, each industry is changing so rapidly. It's market opportunities, you know, how it engages its consumers appetites, you know, how it does business, what business lines may be emerging, et cetera, how it makes money. All of this is evolving. So even if you've been in a company or a given industry for 10 years, 20 years, that same industry is not going to look the same in 2 years. And so every one of us has to figure out a way that we'll be continually evolving and learning and embracing new ways of doing things, new ways of thinking about the same problems, new problems, whatever. And so I think a lot of the comments that my colleagues here have made today are applicable across all aspects of our businesses and to some degree our lives in society.
No question. And I'm very sad to report that we are right at our time. I'd love to give each of you in lightning round fashion a last word. Sushant, I'll start with you. How do you want to leave our group today? Last word.
I would say keep innovation simple. Don't get carried away with it, and don't do innovation for the sake of innovation. You know, it needs to make an impact. It needs to make a difference. Many times we do innovation for the sake of innovation. Don't do that.
And they've always said, don't do technology for the sake of technology, Sushant. So similar concept applied differently. Gilbert, last word.
I would like to encourage you to think systemically on the subject of innovation. How do you create an organizational structure, you know, a social architecture for people to actually be invited to collaborate and to think outside the box? That's key. So I believe on one side, technology will come handy, but also on the other hand, I believe that the role of HR is key. We need to understand that HR is a protagonist in this era, and we need all of you to actually take notice and own the problem.
Well said. Well said. Angela, last word.
Oh, everyone go be fabulous. Have a wonderful, have a great day.
Very good. And then Guillaume, last word, last word.
I would say be 100% honest about your core strengths and weaknesses, and help your management be honest and keep them honest. That's probably one of your key objectives working in the realm of innovation. Don't pretend you are what you're not, and work hard to compensate, of course, for your weaknesses.
That is so well said, and wise words to live by as well as to work by professionally. My gosh, what a wonderful discussion this has been. Sincere thanks, Angela, to you, Sushant, Gilbert, Guillaume. You have made this panel fabulous. We've had a lot of great content shared here today, and you have our thanks on behalf of IIC partners for being part of our global innovation, our global webinar on innovation. Thank you all.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you, Renee.
Thanks, everyone. We'll leave now. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.